Welcome to the Super Abundant Life podcast, where we teach the Bible in a simple, authentic, and practical way so that Christians can skillfully apply the Word of God to create supernatural results in every area of life. This is your host, Olawumi Brigwe. This week, I'm going to be talking all about being busy, being busy, and the topic that I picked today is why being busy all the time is actually killing your productivity. I know that that's almost like, what's killing my productivity? I thought the harder I work and the busier I am, the more productive. Yes, up to a certain point. And from research, from examples, from my own experience, etc., what I've come to realize is that, it's like a bell curve, isn't it? So, it's the harder you work and the more time and effort you put into getting tasks done, your to-do list, etc., your productivity increases, and in some cases might even multiply. So it's going up and up and up. But it gets to a point, you will get to a point if you don't curb it, whereby, number one, it plateaus. And if it plateaus and you still don't make certain adjustments in the activities that you are involved in, the volume of activities that you're involved in, after that your productivity begins to depreciate. So it's like a quadratic curve, right? So it's going up, a negative quadratic curve is going up, and then it plateaus and then it begins to come down. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Lots of us don't actually see that way. You'd be quite surprised. When people think about productivity, they think I need to do more. I need to do more and I need to do more. And it's actually the opposite. It's actually the opposite. And why, there's nobody here listening to me that lives, that leads a one-dimensional life. You're not just one person. So you are, let's say, someone that just has one dimension. They only just have their career and that's it. It's not possible. There's no such human being. We all live multi-dimensional lives. So you're a career person or a business person, probably a wife, a mother, a daughter, a sister, member of a church. You're a friend, you're an auntie, you're a cousin, and all those things. So we all lead multi-dimensional lives. And what that literally means is there are people or things or activities that are pulling at you from different dimensions. And because of that, what is actually easy to do is to give and give and give and give and never actually stop to reflect, never stop to gather your thoughts, never stop to relax, right? And what I'm talking about today in terms of being busy all the time, if you think, I'm just sitting at home playing with my kids, that's not necessarily being busy. It's part of it. Any kind of activity where you're engaging with any other human being or another activity or the outside world is what I classify as being busy. So if you don't really have time where you sit alone with your own thoughts, where you relax or even daydream or let your mind wander and do nothing, then that is what I classify as being busy. All right. This particular thought that I'm sharing today, actually, it sort of began to form in my mind several months ago. And I'm going to link it with an experiences from my own life from even years before that. But several months ago, I read an article about Bill Gates, and Bill Gates was talking about what he learned from Warren Buffett. He had learned so many things, but one thing in particular that he shared was, up to that time, he was completely overwhelmed. Obviously, CEO, founder of Microsoft, his calendar was completely full. He was doing everything. And his wife as well was saying, listen, you might be CEO of Microsoft. You have to come home and do some stuff at home as well. So she didn't really let him off the hook either. She didn't say, okay, fine, you're CEO of one of the most important companies in the world. So when you come home, just veg out and, eat and sleep or whatever it is. He had to look after the kids. He had to do school runs and all this, these are Americans, there's a certain expectations as opposed to maybe some expectations that we that are of, African origin might not necessarily have. But she wasn't going to cut him any slack. She was like, listen, you come back and you come back from dealing with multi-billion dollar deals or contracts, but when you come home, you're going to change the baby's diaper. And so his calendar was completely full, and he got to the point where he just thought, gosh, I don't think I can take this anymore. So he had a meeting with Warren Buffett, and Warren Buffett, in trying to teach him a lesson, just did one simple thing. Obviously, Warren Buffett, I think the man is like 80 something, 82 or something. So he doesn't really use a lot of electronic stuff. He still uses a pocketbook, like a small diary. So he brings out his pocketbook and he hands it over to Bill Gates and says, hey, there's my schedule for the whole year. And he began to flip through. He opened it expecting to see a calendar, because obviously he respected Warren Buffett very much, like a mentor to him, another billionaire, right, multi-billionaire. And he thought, okay, surely he's as busy as I am, considering that he's also managing a lot of things. But then he began to flip through the pocketbook, as in the pages was empty. It's like, what? Empty? And then he finally got to April. I don't remember, what month it was that he was flipping through. But then he got to April and there were only 3 entries for the whole month. And then Warren Buffett was like, oh, well, I think by the time we actually do get to April, there might be maybe 4, as in I might add one more thing to it. And it shocked Bill Gates, as in, what? How can your diary be this empty? Isn't that irresponsible? And basically what Warren Buffett began to teach him was, listen, if you're encumbered by so many things, then you can never rise higher than you currently are, because you will have no time to think. You will have no time to dream. You will have no time to reflect. You will have no time to actually sit down and say, is this working? Rather than being, like a hamster on a wheel, just turning and turning and turning, never pausing to say, oh, this turning that I'm doing, is it leading anywhere? Right? No time to reflect. And that was one of the most impactful things, he still says it today, that he learned from Warren Buffett. And he goes on to say that, right, he had every minute. Imagine that. He said he had every minute of his day packed. And obviously he was sleeping maybe 4 or 5 hours a night, and extremely proud of the fact that he was only sleeping 4 hours or whatever. So because he thought that was the only way to do things. He had to be busy. He had to say yes to everything. Everyone that wanted to have a meeting with him, he had to say yes, because to him, that was being responsible. But he talks about how Warren Buffett taught him the importance of giving yourself time to think. And for me, that reinforced one of my core values in life is a stress-free life. I run from anything that will cause me stress, as in prolonged stress. Obviously, you cannot completely escape stress throughout, There will be things that will momentarily stress you. But for me, anything that will cause me prolonged stress, I withdraw, because I don't like stress. Right? If it's a relationship, someone is stressing me too much, after a while they will see me again. I just would not pick up their calls, because if I every time we talk, I always say finding something negative, and after a while you won't see me again. You will not have access to me, right? So for me, it just reinforced. I'm like, okay, so I'm on the right track. I'm on the right track about this because it's something, and I wasn't always like that. All right. For me, it was actually circumstances that forced me into that way of thinking. I was not always like that. Circumstances forced me to it, and I'll share that with you in a moment. But one thing that the interview that I read, about Bill Gates, one thing that it taught me is being busy all the time is actually counterproductive. It is counterproductive. And I learned that quite pretty much at the beginning of my career, because, as some of you may know, if you know my story, if you don't, go back and listen to episode 1. I buried up in that episode. But basically, at the end of university, I got pregnant, moved to the United Kingdom, and pretty much started building my career. I think Maxine, which is my daughter, was only 3 months, if not 2.5 months, when I started my master's degree, right? In order to be able to teach in this country. So I went back to school. So it was, imagine having a 2.5 month or 3 month old baby, and then you're going to school, like masters, and it's like chilled out. The others like, do you want to go and get a coffee? I'm like, no, I have a baby to get back to, so I cannot really go and get it. So I became very astute with managing time. I didn't have time to waste. I had so many things to do that that it taught me that you have to be very clever in the way you use your time. Because I remember back then we would, I'll put Maxine in the buggy, and would leave the house, I think 6 o'clock in the morning. I would walk, because obviously I wasn't driving at the time, walk all the way to the childminder's house, drop Maxine off, and then walk back to go to the tube station, get on the tube, whatever it is, to go to university, after lectures, etc., etc. So I had to be very clever. I had to be extremely clever in how I used my time. And when I got home, it wasn't, obviously pick up Maxine, come home. She was a tiny little baby. So at that point in time, she needed my attention 100% of the time, because she was only a tiny baby. Okay. But then as she got older, and then I actually began to work. So finished at university, immediately after that, started working. And obviously, teaching is one of the most inflexible professions that you can get into, right? You have to be, the kids get in about 8 or so. You have to be in before the kids. And the kids probably leave 3:34. You cannot really leave with them. So you have to sort of wait, do things, maybe detentions or assembly or whatever it is, and then go home. So one of the reason why I'm saying, it's getting quite long now. The reason why I'm saying all this is very early on in my own sort of combination, which is what I think a lot of us women now struggle with, that, combining family and career. For me, because I was a single mother, it was literally just down to me, right? And then I had a full-on career that was extremely busy. I became very, very effective with using my time. Plus, I also I learned to value my alone time, because I'm an introvert to start with, right? Excessive stimulation of constantly being with people, as in by the time I leave work, after, engaging with students all day, talking to teachers, I want to run away and go and hide somewhere. But then you come back to a baby. So what I did was, when Maxine was quite young, that was actually what helped me in raising her to be quite independent. So it wasn't, so I'm not talking about when she was a baby. Now, when she, started getting older, like 2 and 3 and so on, I would, say, Maxine, okay, this is time for you to stay by yourself and, read a book or whatever it was at the time. And I trained her, I raised her to be independent in that sense, for her to understand that, listen, it's not mommy and me time 24 hours until you go to sleep. Even before you go to sleep, I need 30 minutes to just sit down and do nothing and just relax and decompress. And I trained her to understand that. So for me, that was, and the higher I went in my career, the more efficient I got, to the point whereby I was getting so many results, but I wasn't like staying or sleeping at the office, staying till 7 p.m., whatever, because I just didn't have the luxury. A lot of my colleagues back then, were young. They weren't married. They didn't have kids. I wasn't married, but I had a child to go back to. So I couldn't afford to be staying till 7 or staying till 8 or spending 5 hours marking. No, I wasn't going to do that. So I went to God and I said, you have to show me how to do this so that I can still excel, but not spend all this time whereby I don't actually have time for myself or time for my child. So that's where I learned that. And for me, it worked really well. It worked every job I took on, even going into leadership, which was unheard of for you to work less hours than even the people that were not in leadership. But I always still produced outstanding results that people started coming to me and saying, how are you doing it? You have a child. We can see that you're not stressed. How? Right? Okay. I said all that to say this. So where it sort of went all pear-shaped was in 2015, I got married. I got married to the love of my life. And, my husband has a son who is my son. And obviously I had Maxine. So we became like a blended family to start with. So going from two, now let me try and paint a picture of what I'm saying. And Maxine was 12 when I got married. So after bringing Maxine up to be independent, right, whereby I had my time, I had my space when I wanted it, I had time to think, I had time to just relax or, maybe watch a movie by myself if I wanted to, or just, do you understand? So I had that. I had trained her to that point where at least an hour a day, I was by myself, and she needs to go and do something and, enjoy her own company as well, and not always being in my company. After having all that, and then suddenly being in a situation whereby all of that was literally taken away overnight, where, okay, there's now a husband on the scene that is with you like 100% of the time. So I go to work. So wake up in the morning, the kids, Tejiri, much younger than Maxine, like, okay, get ready for school, go to work, constant stimulation, dealing with this, dealing with that, dealing with this, dealing with that, come home and, pick TJ up from school, from the minder, come home, and then, okay, homework, Oh my God. As in, from the moment I got up, minus my prayer time, to when I went to sleep, I was constantly in contact with people or with activities, or I'm doing this or I'm doing that. And oh my goodness, it was as in, I started to break down because I'm like, my God, I hate this. I was just like, I can't take this. This is not me. I'm stressed. I would tell my husband, I'm stressed. Like, why are you stressed? I'm just stressed. And of course, like, did I mention there's the cooking and the housework and this one and all that, clean, hoover, do this, and oh my God, as in, I was completely overwhelmed. And it was at that point again that I began to relearn how to do what I'm talking about today. I realized that my productivity just like completely crashed. At work, my productivity crashed because I was constantly stimulated. My brain was being constantly stimulated. If I was not with students at school, if I was not leading meetings, leading my team, then I was engaging with my kids. If I was not engaging with my kids, I was engaging my husband. If I was not engaging my husband, I was doing some kind of activity, all day, every day. And I'm like, my God, enough. Enough. Now, how I got past that to where I am today, which is even better than where I was before I got married, I'm going to share those strategies with you at the end, or the second half of today's episode, I should say. But before that, what I want to quickly highlight, all right, are the consequences of leading an extremely busy life. And remember, I don't just mean busy as by you're working. I mean you're constantly stimulated, you're constantly in contact with people, even if they are people that you love. Someone will say, oh, but playing with my children relaxes me. No, it may relax you, but you still need time alone. You still need time alone. Now, the equivalent of this is in the Bible is Mary and Martha. Now, people have sort of narrowed it down to say, it means you should sit at the feet of Jesus, and Jesus talking about reading the Bible and all that. Well, yes, that's one of it, but it's not really. I think the message is deeper than that. I think what Jesus was saying was to Martha, there's too many things going on. Too many things, and that's why you're cranky, that's why you're irritated, that's why you're pointing fingers and judging people, right? That's why you're getting offended, simply because you're overstimulated. That's what Jesus was saying. But Mary literally sat down and decided, okay, this is one thing that I'm going to do. This is what I want to do. This is what is feeding me and helping me in this point in time. And I don't care if the whole world is crashing. This is what I'm going to do. Now, the consequences, if you look at how Martha reacted, right? The consequences of being constantly stimulated or being overly busy without actually taking time to sit by yourself or to relax or just do nothing. Number one, and I experienced this, is resentment. You begin to resent the people. I don't know who the people are. Usually it might be your husband or your wife or the people at work say, I'm the one that's doing everything. How come you guys, you might be, going after your team and saying, I'm the one that's doing everything. How come you guys are not, pulling your weight? If you were pulling your weight, I wouldn't have to do all these things, etc., etc. You begin to point fingers and you begin to resent the people that you think are responsible for you working that hard. Meanwhile, at the end of the day, nobody can force anything on you. You have absolute responsibility for how you spend your time. You just need to choose to say no. And if you say no and the thing falls apart, then people get to learn. They get to pick up the slack and say, oh, okay, if this person doesn't do it, this is the consequence. When they see the consequence of it, then they can actually grow. But if you keep doing everything for them, if you keep doing everything for your husband or your children, etc., etc., then after a while, that resentment begins to build. And I told you, when I got married, there was one day I just told myself, my goodness, I feel like an au pair. I feel like I'm an au pair. In this house, I don't feel like a wife. I feel like an and now I wasn't joking. That was exactly how I felt. As in the first few months of my marriage, I was just like, this is weird. This is strange. This is not me. I don't like this. I don't like this constant stimulation, right? And especially with someone that's an introvert, it's not good for my mental well-being to be constantly stimulated. Constantly. Right? So it's resentment. So I began to put a lot of pressure on my husband. Why are you not doing this? How come you're not helping me? How come and all those things, and resentment. The same way Martha was accusing Mary, you will find yourself accusing someone. It might be your husband, it might be your kids, it might be your team at work. If you are constantly stimulated, overstimulated to the point that it's causing you not to have that time for yourself, just to sit by yourself, right? It will eventually turn into resentment. So that's the first consequence. The second consequence, I mentioned this, is stress, actually on the body and your emotions. So you become emotionally stressed, which also has dangerous effects on the physical body, right? So stress causes confusion and anxiety and depression. You don't want to stress yourself because, I find that when I'm overly stimulated, I become anxious. Like I can't, I'm just like, oh God, what's, almost jittery. That's when I realize that, okay, no, this is not right. You need to take a step back. You need to just drop everything and go for a walk or something. Go and do something. One of the things that I enjoy doing when I find myself in that situation is I love to laugh. I love comedies. I'll go and find something that will make me laugh. I'll just be laughing or whatever it is. Just to relax and to not think about, okay, what's the vision for the next 6 months? Okay, what is going on with that exam with this child or my husband's It's just, for me, nothing serious. As in, focus on nothing serious. That is one of, so if you don't regularly do that, the stress builds up. That's number 2. And the third one, which, if you're a high-flying woman that wants to do well, you want to succeed in your career or your business, you want to make your mark in this world, you want to raise children that are super successful, you want to, and all those things. If you have all those dreams, this third one is probably the most important. If you are overstimulated consistently, it blinds you to possibilities. That ability to be creative, to come up with new ideas, just literally fizzles out. So it creates a lack of clarity. You don't have time to think. You don't have time to reflect. You don't have time to evaluate. You don't have time to dream. So after a while, you no longer see the wood from the trees. You can't see what's going on because you are trapped in this constant cycle of activities and activity and activity. So you're running on the treadmill, but you're not really going anywhere. If someone asks you what's going to happen, in the next 5 years of your life, you can't tell them because you've never sat down to think about it. You're just content with engaging with the activity that every single day presents you. So lack of clarity is one of the consequences of being too busy, constantly filling your day with activities. Your best ideas actually come to you. Research, and from experience, I'm pretty sure you can attest to this as well. Your best ideas come to you when you're relaxed. And as a result, because of that, being constantly occupied doesn't give your mind time to be creative. So your best ideas will come to you when you're relaxed. And I've practiced this so many times. I've noticed that, especially if my mind is turning, if I'm sort of worried about something and my mind is going and I'm trying to think of a solution, I catch myself and I remind myself that, you're wasting your time, because the solution you need will never come in that state of mind, in that state of, agitation, in the anxious state. It will never come, right? So I'm like, you better go and relax. So I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. And I'll go and I'll just literally leave it and say, I'll think about it later. And it is actually when I have let it go, when I'm not thinking about the thing, when, I'm focusing on something else, that the idea, it's happened to me more times than I can count. The solution to that thing literally just rises within me. Why? Because I'm still. The Bible says, be still and know that He is God. It is in this place of stillness that the Holy Spirit can literally communicate with you. Elijah wanted to hear God. The fire, the thunder came, and all those things, all the loud, the noises. It says that God was not in that, but then he was in the stillness. He heard a still small voice. So it's the same thing, the ideas, the supernatural, divine ideas that are going to cause you to explode in your career, on your parenting, or in your marriage. They are not going to come when you're agitated, when your mind is troubled, when your mind is literally running constantly, or when you're constantly being stimulated by activities. They will come when you're still, when you're quiet, right? A lot of times when you're not even thinking about that particular thing, it just comes like, oh, that's going to help me with that or that issue. And there you go, that's it. All right. So that's the third one. And before I move on from that, there's a reason why people always talk about getting like light bulb moments in the shower. Have you had that before? Right? Or, or some people say it's swimming or something like that, where your mind is just completely still, right? When you're relaxed, and as a result of that, you feel distracted. Your mind is wandering. You're not trying to focus on anything. You're just literally letting it go, right? And it is a combination of that makes the brain more likely to bring up creative ideas. So if you want to go far in life, if you want to excel, then you cannot be busy all the time. You cannot be constantly stimulated, because it is counterproductive. It will help for a while, but then after a while, you will reach a plateau. And after that plateau, you're just going to begin to decline. Constantly being stimulated is not, we learned that from Warren Buffett. He said it's not the same as being serious. Say, oh, if I'm playing, then I might look like some kind of lazy person that is unfocused. No, it's not true. You need that lack of focus. Actually, you cannot focus 24 hours a day. It's not good for you, is the point I'm making. There needs to be time where you're not focused on anything. You're not focused on the husband or the children or the work or anything. You're just, for some people, it's reading a good book. You're just there, just allowing your imagination to go and just completely relaxing. The Bible says that Jesus was sharing a parable and says, who wants to build a tower but does not first sit down? In order to buttress this point that I'm making, this is what Jesus was saying there. He said, someone wants to build a tower and they launch straight into activities. They're like, okay, let's build, do this, mix this, increase the whatever. And they immediately launch into a series of activities. Jesus said, if they did not first of all sit down to do what I'm saying to do now, which is just to think, just to dream, just to imagine what it will cost to build that tower and the challenges that they may face along the way and how they would overcome them without being reflective. It says that it is very likely they will not complete that project, which is what I'm saying. So the tower may look like it's going up and up and up, but it's going to get to the point where it will plateau and then it would decline after that. So Jesus also taught us that principle. You need to have moments or times or seasons where you sit down. So some people take retreats, and so sorry to say, but some retreats where you're constantly stimulated as well. So you're in a group of people and it is activity and activity and activity. That is good for maybe spiritually going to a new level, but that's not even what I'm talking about. I'm talking about where you are by yourself. So it might be 10 minutes in your day. It might be just take an hour or whatever it is where you're alone with yourself. And some of us, the truth is, we haven't done this in such a long time that it might be difficult to do. So you can start with 5 minutes and they'll build up from there. So doubling back to my own story, as I go back now to share the strategies that I talked about. So I got to that point where I was like, I'm done. There's no way. I was unhappy. And this was literally a few months. We'd only been married a few months, but I was like, I can't take this. I can't handle this. Right. I just feel inadequate all the time. I just feel like I have no peace and I'm stressed all the time. So what did I do? what did I do? I just literally sat down and the Holy Spirit began to teach me. I don't actually remember where I got these 4 things, the strategy basically that I'm going to share. I don't remember how it came. I think it literally just, I don't remember if I read it somewhere. I honestly don't. I don't think I did. I think I was literally, I went to God and I said, this is the situation. I need you to help me. And I copied this from my journal. So I believe this actually came out of my time of my time with God and studying the Bible, whatever it is. But essentially, I'm not going to go through the whole thing. So I actually do have a PDF. Right? And these strategies that I'm going to share with you, these are the things that I applied to my own life that got me out of that mess that I was in, where I was doing everything and it was not healthy for me, to the place where now, honestly, I work hard. Okay. I'm very hardworking. I get my work done. But at the same time, you will not look at my calendar and see activities, as in back to back. There are days when I have activities back to back, but I schedule time to read. So if I say, oh, I've been busy all day, it doesn't mean I've been doing activities all day. In fact, I don't, unless it's a very peculiar season where I'm just going to sacrifice and say, okay, take one for the team and let's just have a crazy week or whatever it is. It is rare. It is rare whereby my calendar is full because I am constantly being stimulated by activities. So my calendar is full. So I have my working hours, but I have things. So I have when I work, I have when I write, I have when I do podcasts, when I have my coaching calls, when I do all that, when I, have meet with my team, etc. But I also have time where I do nothing. I have time where, I'll just say, oh, okay. What do I want to do just for fun? Just to relax and get out of work mode. I have that scheduled into my day. And nobody can touch it. So if you say, oh, can I talk to you? And I look at my calendar, I'm not going to give it up so that I can be externally stimulated, because it is so important for me to have that time. All right. So that's where I am now, going from, that point where I was completely stressed and completely overwhelmed to where I am now, that somebody might look at me and say, you're not working. You're not working. And I had, for those of you that may know him, Pastor Poju, say something about Bishop Oyedepo. And he said, and, to put in context, Bishop Oyedepo is a pastor of 50, probably more than that, because it's a 50,000 seater church in Lagos, Nigeria, but they probably hold about 3 services, right? So let's say 100,000 people in the church, 2 universities. So he runs 2 universities, and there are other church. So the branches of his church, probably like 1,000 branches all over the world. And I remember, Pastor Pojo mentioned something and said, every time he called Bishop Oyedepo to say, can I come and see you? Say, oh yes, come. And he'd be like wondering, how does this guy, oh, not this guy, how does, Bishop have so much time? How is it possible that he has so much time? Someone that has all those responsibilities, he's a husband as well, and a father, grandfather, right? How does he have that much time? And he said something which again is one of reinforced one of my own core values, that listen, activities do not always equate to productivity. In fact, the more productive you are, the less you do. And my PDF is titled Achieve More by Doing Less. And I'll put a link in the show notes for you to be able to access and download that PDF. So what I'm going to share now is a part of it. So it's not the whole thing. I guide you through step by step to, first of all, look at your day, your usual day, how you're spending your day, and then to be able to, fizzle it down, etc. So I can't go through all that in today's podcast. So I will link to it in the show notes. You can download it It's titled Achieve More by Doing Less. And it's a free PDF that you can download, okay? But what I want to share with you as I wrap up today's episode is this. If you're at a point where everything I've described, right? Maybe from my own life or Bill Gates or whatever it is, or any of the consequences that I've described, you can see those consequences in your own life. Then what you need to do, I'm going to give you 4 things, right? Four categories that can help you sort out those activities. Because the truth is, if you are constantly stimulated and in constant contact with all sorts of activities, including the ones that are important, like playing with your children or supervising homework or cooking. These things are important, but if you're constantly engaged in those kind of things, you're doing too much. And that's just the honest truth. You're doing too much. You're doing too much. So what I'm going to share, what it's going to help you do is to help you put all the activities, the usual activities that you engage in that are too much, into 4 categories that will help you now sort of reduce what you personally are doing. Okay, are you ready? Right. So what you do, and I'll use examples from my own life. So I got to that point whereby I, doing everything, go to work, come back, pick up my son, come home, cook, do this one, do that one. So that by the time I got into bed, I just literally collapsed. It was not, it wasn't good. So the first thing you need to do would be to catalog all these activities. So you take an overview of a week, for example, and say, what are the things that I do? So what's my typical day or my typical week? What does that look like? Right? So once you've done that, I will, it's all in the PDF so that you can follow step by step. But there are 4 categories. All of the activities that you're engaged in today, right? Usually they can be put into 4 categories. And those are the categories that I'm going to talk through to help you. Now, the first one, so I love acronyms, and this one too is time. So TIME, and this was how God gave it to me. He said time, and he began to show me. He said T is for this, I is for that. So the first one is T, which is transfer. Right? There's certain activities, right, that you're doing in your life now that need to be delegated or outsourced. I'll give you an example. I love a tidy house, as in I'm formally OCD, as in everything needs to be in its place. I cannot stand an untidy environment, as in fact, I've mellowed a little bit now, but, everything needs to be in its place. So in those early months of marriage, I was used to doing things a certain way, and then I got married, and then, my husband and my son are not the tidiest people in the world. Maxine had been sort of molded into shape because she too was not very tidy. But after living with me for how many years, she had fallen into line. So she was all right. But hey, my husband and my son, not very tidy. So constantly like picking up stuff and tidying and cleaning and and say, pick up your stuff. Why can't you do this? Why can't you do that? Etc. So I love a tidy house, but I don't love housework. In fact, there are certain parts of housework. So like hoovering, for some reason, I like it because maybe I'll just be listening to a podcast. I don't mind that. Ironing, I would never do. All right. I asked my husband before we got married, I said, I don't iron. Will you iron for me? And he said, yes. I never iron. All right. It was one of the things that had to be ticked on the list. A man that will iron for me. And one that I absolutely detest is cleaning toilets or bathrooms. Do you know why? Because I have this thing for germs. I'm one of those people that I wash my hands like a lot of times a day. I'm getting better, but I see germs in everything. I'm like, oh, there's germs, you can't wash your hands and whatever. So for me to go and clean bathrooms and so on. So imagine having to do that, and I agreed with my husband, and I said, you need to wash the bathrooms. And sometimes, he's preparing because he works, and then he's a pastor as well. So weekends when he's supposed to be washing bathroom, I'm like, will you wash the bathroom? He's preparing for Sunday and etc. So I'm like, he's preparing now. I'll now start harassing him to go. So sometimes I'll end up washing it, and my mind will like, God, germs. So what am I saying? I love a tidy house. I cannot abide a dirty home. But did I want to clean? No. Right? So one of the first thing is I identify things that needed to be done, but they did not need to be done by me. And one of those things for me was cleaning. So my husband said, I will get you a cleaner. I said, cleaner? No, I've never had a cleaner. One day, somebody just pressed the bell. I opened the door, and there was a lady standing there and said, hi, my name is so and so. I believe, your husband called me because I think she had put a leaflet through the door advertising her cleaning service. My husband called her and booked an appointment for me. And that was how I ended up starting to use a cleaner. And do you know, that single act of just getting a cleaner in once a week, and it's not that expensive. Once a week, you don't know what that thing did for my marriage. You remember the state that I was in at that point in time. The fact that I did not have to worry about those, as in bathrooms and all those things, and someone that would just come and clean, and what the rest of the family would do throughout the week was to maintain and just make sure everything was sort of clean and little here and there. It helped me so much, as in unbelievably. Someone would say just cleaning. For me, that was a big, massive load off my chest. It gave me peace. Right? So the first one is T, which is transfer. These are tasks that need to be delegated or outsourced. All right? And one of the ways that you recognize that is if it is high impact. So for me, having a clean house was high impact, but low enjoyment factor. So there are two things that will help you identify things that need to be outsourced. So transfer, outsourced, delegated. If it's done, it has a high impact on your well-being, on whatever it is. But for you to do it, the enjoyment factor, you enjoying doing it, is low. So you need to get rid of it. Someone else needs to come in and help you do that. That's the first one. The second one is I. So we're using acronym time. So I is for institute, or right. If I'm not using the word institute, it is to automate. It's to automate or to systemize. And I am the queen of systems. I never do anything from scratch twice. Once I've created something once, I will systemize it. I'm like, that's one thing I teach my team. Don't create anything from scratch. If you have written something, if you have created something, whatever it is, whatever it might be, save it somewhere so that the next time you need it, you literally go and grab it and start from there. Never start anything from scratch twice. So I'm the queen of, I love systems because systems are one way to get your time back, to claim back your time. All right. So the second one is to institute. So for example, if you don't mind cooking, right, but you don't particularly enjoy it. So this is like, you don't mind, right? But it's not great. So for me, again, cooking is not high on my list. So what you could do is, instead of spending 2 hours every night making dinner, you can automate parts of your cooking. So 2 hours of planning and meal prep, cooking in bulk and freezing once a week or once a month could probably mean only spending 15 to 30 minutes getting dinner ready each night. So by instituting or systemizing your cooking, right, you have reduced the amount of time that you're spending every night in cooking. So that's the second one, which is to institute or systemize or to automate, right? So what can be automated? What can be systemized? Another example of that is in parenting. If you get your children into routines, when you're starting out, you may need to write it out for them and say, okay, this is a checklist, this is what you do. Honestly, you have no idea how much that would help you, in your own well-being, mental well-being, and to get your time back. Because you're not constantly saying, have you done this? Get up. It's time to get up and, go and have your bath. Me, one of the first things I teach my children is, here's an alarm clock. And I learned that from the Obamas. I read an article. Here's an alarm clock. You wake up by yourself. You wake up. My children, the younger one is 10. But since he was 6, he's been getting up by himself. He gets up and, have his bath, have his shower, tidy his room, go down, have breakfast. As in, I don't wake anybody up. I don't wake anybody up. They wake up by themselves, right? So that gives me time in the morning. I can sort of chill with my husband. We have because we have been able to do that, we literally have that time in the morning to not think about kids. As in, obviously, Maxine gets ready. Before she goes, she'll come in, we'll gist for a bit, and then she'll go to school. TJ goes to school much later. But it just gives us that time as a couple to just hang out without children. But imagine if I was doing everything, have you brushed your teeth? Have you done this? Okay, go and have your breakfast. Oh, come back. Go and tidy your room. If I was getting up to do that, then I wouldn't have that time. So institute means to set routines, to systemize, to automate as much as possible. And that will reduce the amount of time that you're using to, if you're just starting from scratch every single day. The third one is maintain. All right. These are things that are high impact and you love doing, you enjoy doing. So, for example, some people love cooking. I have a friend that says when she's stressed, she goes to cook, right? And the cooking actually sort of soothes her, and that's how she finds her joy. For me, it's the opposite. If I'm stressed and you're saying, what are we eating for dinner? The kind of eye that I'll give you better leave me alone. If I'm stressed, the last thing I want to think about is cooking. Do you understand? But for some people, for example, that friend of mine, she loves it. So she just goes into the kitchen and she begins to cook all sorts, 10 different meals and dishes because she loves it. So there's some things that the impact factor is high. And also the enjoyment, the fulfillment factor is also high. Don't automate any of those things. Don't delegate it. Keep it for yourself because you are drawing nourishment from doing those kind of tasks. Okay. And the last one is E, which is expel. And this one is low impact, low enjoyment. All right. Low impact, low enjoyment. These are tasks that you need to cut out or reduce to a bare minimum. All right. You don't particularly enjoy them, or they even make you feel bad, and they have very little to give in terms of value. These are the thieves of your productivity and your peace of mind, and they need to go. So these are particularly the ones where are stealing that time of stillness that you require. And guess what is the biggest one? Phone. Technology. Just absent-mindedly, mindlessly scrolling, or mindlessly just, checking this one, or WhatsApp, whatever it is. You're not really, as in, you're only doing it out of habit. It's not particularly because, I'm on social media, so that time when I'll go in and I'll oh wow, and I'll, engage with posts, and the people that I follow and all those things that I gain from. But I also know there are times when I'm there and I'm just scrolling. I'm not getting anything from it. I'm not particularly enjoying it, but habit. That's what I mean. So there's certain things that they just low impact and low enjoyment or / low fulfillment, they need to go, or at least reduce to a bare minimum. So for example, the way I've been able to deal with social media, I don't get any notifications on my phone. The only time I see messages, for example, in WhatsApp is when I go in. right? Because otherwise it's ping, 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 ping. So I don't get notifications. I go in fairly, because I run a business and part of my business is on WhatsApp. So I go in regularly, right? But I go in when I go in. So I'll say this is the time when I go into WhatsApp, and I go into WhatsApp. So I go in regularly and frequently, but I don't go in when a message comes in, if that makes sense. So that helps me to say, okay, this is the time when I'm just going to veg out and just chill during my work day and just relax and do nothing. And it's scheduled in, and nobody's going to take that time. Nobody. Sometimes even when my husband calls, he still said it yesterday. Is that when he hears the way I answer, it's like, you're busy, Abby. I'm like, then okay, I'll call you back. And he just, because he knows that, yeah. And that busy does not necessarily mean I'm working. It could mean that is the time where I'm just going to just relax or read a book or just watch something funny, right? That's what I mean. So the last one, expel, so that you have more time to be able to think creatively, to be able to relax, to be able to dream, to be able to be still, so that those ideas can come to you, so that you can resist stress from your life, and literally increase the enjoyment factor of your life. Now, what I'm going to finish up with is a quote from Steve Jobs, and this basically describes everything I've talked about today. The way he said it, I absolutely loved it. So I just picked up, I bought a book that I'm reading, and I saw it in there. And oh, this goes really well, actually, what I'm talking on the podcast today. So I'm going to read to you what he said. Before he died, obviously, and said that's been one of my mantras, right? And he explained, let me just read the quote. It says, that's been one of my mantras. He said, focus and simplicity, right? So he said focus and simplicity are the mantras of the success, whatever success he achieved in Apple. Focus means when you're working, right? Simplicity means reduce the activities that you are involved in. Let me keep reading. It says, simple can be harder than complex. So this is still Steve Jobs talking. It says simple. So leading a simple life, like I've described, can be harder than complex. You have to work hard to get your thinking clean to make it simple, which is exactly what I've been saying. But it's worth it in the end, because once you get there, you can move mountains. It says simple can be harder than complex. You have to work hard to get your thinking clean to make it simple, or your life clean and simple in order to make it worthwhile. It says, but it's worth it in the end, because once you get there, you can move mountains. Once you can still your mind and get to that point where you're not being serious, you're literally just relaxed, it says you can move mountains. So when he returned to the company, one of the ways that he implemented this idea that he's talking about, simplicity and focus, is they had a lot of products. I think they had more than 40 products. And he just said, no, we're doing too many things. Like Jesus said to Martha, he said, we're in combat with so many things. And he narrowed it down and he said, listen, we're only going to go with 4. And they only focused on the 4. And he just to finish up, he says, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. So simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Right. So that's me done for today. I hope that's helped you. I will link the full document, the full PDF, where I go through step by step. I think there are about 3 steps. What I described was one step, one part of it. If you want the full document to get your time back, to achieve more by doing less, I will link it to the show notes. Just click on it, submit your email, and then you can download the document. That's me done for this week, and I'll be back next time. Thanks. Bye.